Story 1. I had two very young children. I told him while we were dating that I wasn't sure I wanted more children, so if that was what he was looking for, we should split. About 8 months later, he asked me to marry him. As we made arrangements, he kept talking about growing the family. I agreed that when my youngest was in school, I would have one more so he could have a biological child. However, he kept talking about having 5 more. I kept telling him it wasn't too late to call it off, but I wasn't having 5 more. He insisted he loved me and didn't care if we had any more, but he always dreamed of a big family. A week before the wedding, I overheard him talking to a friend about forcing me into creating his family. For days before the wedding, I canceled and ended our relationship. 27 years later, he is married with 6 children and 1 on the way. I am married with my 2 adult children in their 30s and my nephew in his early 20s. We lost a lot of money, but it saved us both from being unhappy. If you are considering a similar situation, do it. Trust yourself and do not worry about what everyone else will think. Story 2. My friend's fiancé turned out to be a flat earther. I suppose that was just the beginning. The wedding is off, but my sanity remains intact. Story 3. I had a medical crisis requiring multiple surgeries, and his reaction was to yell at me for faking illnesses to avoid housework and breaking my things to motivate me to get out of bed. He seemed so relieved when I ended it that I'm pretty sure that was exactly what he wanted without looking like the bad guy. Story 4. Not me, but my older cousin. She was engaged to a man who had previously struggled with alcohol addiction. She refused to get engaged to him until he got sober. He did, so they got engaged and planned their wedding. 9 days before the wedding, she discovered he had started drinking again. She instantly canceled the wedding. I remember being a young teenager at the dinner table where all my aunts, my mother, great-aunt, and grandmother were discussing it. By discussing, I mean they were all praising my cousin for sticking to her principles and knowing when to leave. They all agreed it was much better to leave before the wedding. It was a formative moment for me. Here were these older women who were country club members, old-fashioned, and had already spent a significant amount of money to fly in, and they were all absolutely on my cousin's side from the start. This wasn't a cheap wedding. These weren't progressive women. Since it had been hidden so well, they all had no idea about the man's drinking problem and had genuinely loved the soon-to-be groom. He had total family approval. It made me so much more comfortable than my peers about leaving relationships that just weren't working. I knew my family wouldn't judge me, even if he seemed nice, and it would be a hassle for them if I decided to say no. So I didn't stay in bad relationships and never felt pressured to keep up appearances that everything was perfect around my family. I'm so grateful to my cousin for having the courage to cancel that wedding. And I'm so happy for her that she's in a strong marriage now with wonderful children she's raising to know they're loved and supported. Story 5. He became violent during our engagement, choking me until I was unconscious. A few days later, I visited my parents. I assume my dad saw the bruises because, for the first time I can remember, he had an emotional conversation to ask if this was the life I really wanted and where I saw myself in 5 years. I realized my now ex was probably going to kill me, and indeed he pointed a gun at me when I broke up with him. I had to get a restraining order and ended up studying abroad that summer in an attempt to get away from him. He moved schools and later married, then divorced my step-cousin. Story 6. I had a cousin who called off his wedding a month before the date. He discovered that she had been married before and had 2 young children whom she left in her home country. Story 7. A coworker called off her wedding because her fiancé did none of the planning with her. He just coasted through the process. The final straw was when she pulled up a catering meal plan she had tried to organize with him for 6 months, and he lost his temper because she should have known his father hated cottage cheese. She broke up with him then and reimbursed him for the small amount he contributed to everything, which was only about 25%. Story 8. My 2 college friends had been dating since their sophomore year. They planned their wedding for the fall after graduation, but he called it off the day before. He loved her, but she was very controlling in their relationship, and he never really tried to push back. He was also realizing that she might have a drinking problem, and he didn't want to deal with that forever. It was a mess. They lived together and shared mutual friends. Ultimately, it was the right choice and he should have figured it out earlier. They both eventually married other people, and she got sober about 10 years later. Story 9. My wife's father was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer a couple of weeks before the wedding. We called it off. He had surgery and was feeling well at the time. We decided to go ahead with the original date because if we postponed it, he might not be able to see it. We just scaled back the party a bit. The wedding was great. He passed away 15 months later, missing the birth of his first grandchild, our son, by 3 months. Story 10. We started the process and thought it was an excessive amount of money to feed people we barely know for one day. So we decided to plan a small gathering in 20 days and then took a 2-week trip to Hawaii instead. It was the best decision we ever made. Story 11. His mother felt like she was planning her own wedding. I had no say in anything. She uninvited my best friend and cousins from my bridal party behind my back because they were single and instead invited a niece of hers I had never met and the groomsmen's girlfriends who I barely knew. She booked a hall and picked the menu without consulting us, even though she wasn't contributing any money. Whenever I brought this up to my now ex, he took his mother's side. That was a massive red flag to me, and I knew she would always be interfering while he would always support her, so I called it off. His now wife is a miniature version of his mother. She used to be cute but now has the same haircut and color as his mother and even dresses similarly. I'm glad I walked away from that situation while I could. Story 12. My father had a heart attack on a Monday evening in May, and our wedding was set for Saturday. I checked in with my fiancée and called it off as soon as I received the news on Tuesday. We did not know if he would survive or how he would be if and when he woke up. I wanted to spare everyone the emotional turmoil that was about to happen and focus solely on him. We eventually got married shortly before Christmas. Dad was there and made a full recovery. I have never regretted anything for a second. Story 13. We moved in together after the engagement. Her Armenian parents threw a $20,000 engagement party at a yacht club and invited about 50 people. I invited my family and 6 friends. There was a priest who spoke in Armenian. It was essentially a wedding without the vows. We signed a 6-month lease, and it quickly became apparent that she did not know how to function in life. She didn't pay her own bills or credit cards but thought I was financially irresponsible because I had student loans and credit card debt from college. She was so spoiled and out of touch that when we looked for houses, her requirements were at least 2,000 square feet and a pool. Maybe her dad would have given us the down payment, but I wasn't sticking around to find out. This was in 2008, right before the market crash. Homes like she wanted were priced over $800,000, and many would soon be foreclosed after their value dropped by half. She wanted me to get rid of my cats. She became angry and jealous when I went to my sister's baby shower a day early to help, saying, "I'm way more important than some baby." She didn't like me spending time with anyone but her and didn't want to spend time with my family. She wanted to stop having sex until we were married because her aunt told her it was in the Bible. I made it clear that any one of those things was a deal breaker for me. She got sick, vomited all over the apartment, and didn't clean it up, expecting me to do it. I did clean it when I got home out of care for her, but 8 hours of vomit on carpet left a stain. The second time she got sick and threw up in the bathroom, I told her she could clean it up or leave the bathroom door shut. Took a week. Then came the baby trap. I saw it, sidestepped it, and made plans to leave. I got a new job, moved back to my hometown, and regained my happiness. That all happened within 4 months of the 6-month lease. I realized that not only did I not love her, I didn't even like her. I dodged a huge bullet, actually several. Story 14. I was being pressured by her Italian family. Luckily, I withdrew at the last moment, but it was close. All the arrangements were made. It was the best decision I ever made. Story 15. I called off my wedding about 2 weeks before the date. He was emotionally and verbally abusive throughout our relationship, but it only worsened as we got closer to the wedding. I knew that if we got married, I would be divorced within a year. It was the best decision of my life. Story 16. A friend of mine had her fiancé suddenly call off the wedding days before the event. His excuse was that he wasn't ready. He cleared out all his things within a week and went off to basic training not long after. She was devastated. I remember getting the call with her in hysterics and having to take some of the wedding decor out so she wouldn't have to look at it. She has since gotten married, has 3 kids, and seems pretty blissfully happy. I thought they got together a bit too fast after what happened, but her husband is genuinely still over the moon about her a good 13 years after the wedding. Story 17. 2 months before the wedding, police showed up at the house stating they had a warrant for his arrest for robbing a gas station of kratom. He had a raging addiction, and I realized this was not the life I wanted to live. I ended the relationship and left the house behind. A few years later, I rekindled my relationship with my high school sweetheart, and we now have a beautiful baby. Hold out until you find what you truly deserve and never settle for less. No more wedding police. Story 18. I went to try on dresses and felt completely out of place. After reflecting on it, I realized I didn't actually want to get married, so we canceled the wedding. That was 4 years ago, and we are still together, just not married. Story 19. Our date was set during the pandemic, so we called it off and planned to postpone. As time went on, we realized we didn't want a wedding. We are a same-sex couple, not religious and not close to our families. None of the traditional aspects of a wedding appeal to us. One of these days, we will elope. Story 20. He cheated on me earlier in the relationship and I stayed. He was very controlling of our finances, and I fell out of love with him. I realized we barely had anything in common aside from our jobs. We were set to marry, and then COVID-19 hit. Our wedding got postponed, and I took that opportunity to leave. My mom and sister helped me pack up my belongings, and I left all the furniture I had bought. I am now married to my best friend, and we have a baby on the way. Story 21. I was 19 and about to marry someone who was not right for me, but I thought I was in love. My best friend said she wouldn't be my maid of honor if I went through with it. She was not a controlling person, nor was she comfortable expressing her feelings. I walked away, and I am extremely thankful I did. Story 22. We had an almost 1-year-old, and she was pregnant with our second child. There was too much stress planning everything, so we called it off. That was 4 years ago. We are having a small ceremony with a judge today. Story 23. Because it was extremely stressful, very expensive, and the planning for most weddings is more for the family and friends than the couple. We still ended up getting married later, but we chose to get married in St. Lucia instead and told those who wanted to come that they could join us. We had 7 people show up, including ourselves. I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. Story 24. Best friends since middle school. They were all set for the wedding about a month away when he went out with me and 6 of our close friends. We saw her with a woman none of us knew at a bar where we were stopping for a pub crawl. She pretended not to recognize him and told bar security that he was a stalker. After some arguing, we convinced them that he was her fiancé. Security asked everyone to leave, and it turned out the woman she was with was her girlfriend. His fiancé was gay and hadn't disclosed it to anyone, using him as cover. He called off the wedding but was kind enough not to out her to her family, who were very devout Muslims, although she wasn't practicing. She eventually married that woman 2 years later. My friend found someone else, and they are expecting their first child in a few months. Story 25. Simply put, I loved him but was not in love with him. My family adored him and his family adored mine. We went to school together and had the same close friend group. We were the only 2 from our group to attend the same college. He was very bright and helped tutor me where I fell short. I thought we were casually dating until he proposed in front of all our family, friends, several high school teachers, and an entire restaurant. After that, our mothers really pushed the planning. Before I knew it, I had a dress, a venue, and was sitting down for our tasting. That's where I lost it. I just couldn't see myself or him being happy a decade down the road. I called it off the next day, lost most of my friends, and my mother stopped speaking to me for a few months. A year later, to the weekend, he got married to our marriage counselor's niece. So I feel he recovered quickly. When it's not meant to be, it sucks, but it will all work out for the best. Story 26. COVID. We were going to go abroad, but there were travel restrictions, so we couldn't do it. It would have been an 8-person wedding with close family, so it wasn't a particularly dangerous situation. Additionally, one family member was living in the country, so it wasn't an actual destination wedding. Then we had a baby, and the whole plan was put on hold for a couple of years. Story 27. I won't be ready to marry you until after we go to therapy. 1 week later, he asks me to marry him on a ship in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by 30 of his friends and family, along with thousands of others with a full camera crew. Story 28. Even though the bride was not a practicing Jehovah's Witness, she still wanted the atheist groom to convert to please her very religious family, who were not attending the wedding and had not spoken to him during the 3 years they had been dating. Story 29. I wanted a very small ceremony, but he demanded something extravagant. I wanted to be married, yet I dislike weddings. I believe they are a waste of money. Story 30. I discovered he had been cheating online for the entire duration of our relationship and ended things 6 months before the wedding day. Story 31. She told me that she was settling for me and had viewed our relationship as transactional for some time. I wanted a spouse, not a roommate. Story 32. He said, if I knew you had a chronic illness, I never would have dated you. While trying to arrange all the refunds, I discovered that he was on parole for a cyber fraud crime and was attempting to manipulate our home loan application during settlement, which placed all the risk against my parents' home. Story 33. My ex-fiancée broke up with me 5 months before our wedding day. She was likely very unhappy and gave me an ultimatum to propose, which was probably the final straw. In a way, she did me a favor by ending things. I spent the next 7 to 8 years single while she had 4 children with her new husband. In the end, we both got what we wanted. Story 34. Her best friend crashed the wedding. She spilled something that utterly shattered me. She had sex with her ex the night before our wedding. I'm glad, because otherwise I would have ended up in court to determine whose child is mine, and I bet I wouldn't be the father of them all. Story 35. We both backed out of the wedding. She was 5 months pregnant, I was away a lot with the Navy, and we were also short on money. We both have big families, and the costs were spiraling along with the stress. We decided to call it off, booked a flight to Las Vegas, and she bought a 40-pound wedding dress from an online store. We got married by Elvis in front of the Welcome to Las Vegas sign. It was just the 2 of us. We had a really nice week in Las Vegas with a hilarious wedding and honeymoon all rolled into one for under £5,000. I think we upset some family members since nobody was invited, but we definitely made the right decision. Story 36. My fiancé kept trying to plan but rejected me and became anxious whenever I tried to contribute. We began having strange, prolonged conversations about our relationship. He was essentially trying to push me to break up with him so he wouldn't appear to be the bad guy. Eventually, I gave him the ring back, and 2 months later, he posted a video coming out. Story 37. I was engaged, and one night my fiancé was leaving my place to say goodbye to my 2 young children. My son said, "Bye, I love you." My fiancé didn't say it back and looked as though he had seen a ghost. I waited a few days before bringing it up, saying, "We need to talk about the other night, right?" He replied, "I don't know what happened. All I could think about was needing to get out of here. That was it. I called it off." In hindsight, I shouldn't have accepted his proposal before he told my children he loved them. That said, he was a wonderful boyfriend, and I'm thankful for the fun times we shared. He just wasn't ready to be a stepfather. Story 38. He punched me in the face. We got into a fight and he reacted emotionally. I called the police and withdrew half the money from our checking account. We were living paycheck to paycheck, so everything bounced. I laughed about it to his friend when he called to ask for the money back. Story 39. Not me, but a friend. He called it off just about a week before after she referred to his son, who has autism and is a nice kid, using a derogatory term. Story 40. My ex was mentally and verbally abused by his parents. As time went on, he thought it was acceptable to treat me the way his father treated his mother and to exert control over me. About 6 months later, I saw him pushing a baby stroller. He was cheating and had a child with his now wife. Story 41. I called off my first engagement about 2 months before the wedding. I was quite young, and he was significantly older and had previously been married. I gradually came to the realization that we had different views and that I wanted to continue my education and see the world. I rationalized to myself that we could probably have a few good years together, but I had no expectation that we would stay married. After I ended the engagement, my family and friends universally told me I had done the right thing. In retrospect, he was jealous and controlling, and it was a terrible relationship. But guess what? I went to graduate school, traveled the world, and have been married to my true love for 31 years. Story 42. I fought with her on average 45 minutes to 3 hours at least once a week, sometimes up to 3 times a week, for 7 years. None of my friends liked her much, and I thought I had a normal relationship. I remember when I proposed to her, we fought every night that week for about 3 hours. Despite having the perfect cliffside plan and proposal, she reacted negatively because I remarked on the dark clouds moving in from the shore. I took the ring back and proposed again later that week with equal thought. She had a way of pushing every button I had. If I wanted to talk it out, she wanted to discuss it the next day. If I wanted to discuss it the next day, she had to talk it out all night. I had been a long-time smoker, on and off, actively quitting. I had been smoking when she wasn't around and finally stopped caring about being caught. One morning, after fighting with her the night before, I came out on my porch. She walked out and said, "You're smoking again?" in a condescending tone, as if she were about to list how much she loved me but how inconsiderate I was. My response was, "I'm done. We're done." She stammered in disbelief and then tried to tell me that I was destroying her daughter's future and current home, which was my home. It was the best $35,000 loss ever. My life was immediately better without her, and I'm now married to a woman with whom I have had 5 arguments in 5 years. Most of those arguments arose from my efforts to undo the defensive and offensive mechanisms I built up to prevent being hurt. I also quit smoking for real. It's amazing what you can do when you're not stressed to the limit. We talked on and off over the years, mostly when she was down, depressed, and alone from one failed relationship or another. Most recently, she was arrested for domestic assault. Her partner hired a lawyer in secret and a private investigator to follow her for a divorce case he had been building. Apparently, I wasn't the only person who felt trapped and wanted out. Story 43. I had some friends who went through a challenging relationship. They loved each other, but the would-be bride was struggling, and her partner tolerated a lot. She was constantly dealing with an eating disorder and suicidal thoughts and was confused about her gender identity. The real breaking point was her desire to be polyamorous while he did not share that interest. He ultimately allowed her to pursue other relationships, even though he disliked the idea. He had been supporting her for years and believed she couldn't manage without him. However, he realized how unbalanced their relationship had become when she started seeing someone else and understood she would never be able to give him what he needed. They had a dog they both loved, but she took it because she felt unstable and believed she needed it more. She has since transitioned to living as a man, and I don't know what her ex-partner is doing, but I hope he is happy. He was an incredibly kind person. Story 44. I called it off a week before the big day. He made my life difficult during the preparation phase. Everything was an issue with him or his mother. My dress, my jewelry, the venue, and my family. He quit his job 10 days before this, even though his parents were quite well off and expected us to live off of that. They were greedy and controlling. If I reacted to anything, he would threaten me into complying. When the abuse started, I woke up one day and put an end to it all. I never communicated with him in any form again. I was a wreck for a few months, but I would take that suffering any day over life with him. 15 years later, he still stalks me and tries to get me to talk or react. Clearly, I dodged a bullet and couldn't be happier. Story 45. I have a cousin who called off their wedding a week before the ceremony. They eventually reconciled and married 3 years later but ended up divorced. I'm sorry, but if you call off a wedding once, it is unlikely to last if you get back together and then marry. Story 46. Yes, I did it a day before the big day. The anxiety about the whole production and the idea of marriage was weighing heavily on me. I hadn't eaten or slept in weeks. I thought it was just normal nerves, but it became overwhelming. I ended up going to therapy for a few months, where I figured out a lot of things and understood my fears. They mostly stemmed from the fact that no one in my family had a happy or lasting marriage, except for my uncle, and I had somehow internalized that to mean I was destined to end up the same way. We stayed together through that whole time after calling it off, and it was a rough road for a while. But now we are married. We had a small ceremony with just a few people without any extreme attention and have been married for 6 years. I definitely regret not having stopped things earlier in the process and pulling the rug out from under her. I wish we had just had a small ceremony at the beginning. It would have avoided a lot of pain, but we got through it. Story 47. She went to a party, found someone better, and called it off about 2.5 months before the wedding. They were together for 10 years and had 2 children. That was 2 years ago, and I am not doing well. Story 48. He came after me and tried to choke me. He was upset that I had received a wedding card and he had not. This was the culmination of bizarre behaviors that increased as the wedding approached. I genuinely believe he had a traumatic brain injury, and I did not recognize the effects until it was too late. I canceled the wedding 1.5 weeks before the date. I was fortunate to reach my parents. His mother took our wedding gifts, which shocked me then and still does 15 years later. He sold everything in the apartment and then disappeared into Montana. The last I heard, he was living unhoused in Hawaii. Story 49. Have you heard of the taxi cab theory? My former fiancé's father passed away unexpectedly, and he really lamented the fact that she wasn't in a more responsible and respectable place at the time of her father's passing. She had a job in the service industry and quickly made arrangements to transition into medical sales, and shortly thereafter, she proposed. I think she thought the next logical adult step in her life was marriage, and we just happened to be dating. She was about 5 years older than me, and I still felt very young to be getting married at 24. I suggested a 2-year engagement to ease that feeling, which also meant we would be together 3 years total at the time of the wedding. Weeks before the wedding, I woke up every day with a sick feeling in my stomach and couldn't fathom having to work so hard to be happy for the rest of my life. It was nothing against her at all. I loved her and her family, I just don't think it was the right fit, and I think we wanted different things. I called off the wedding a little less than 3 weeks before it was scheduled. It was a destination wedding, and it gave everyone just enough time before the 2-week cutoff to cancel for a refund if they chose. I definitely think it was the right decision. Very shortly after we broke up, she started dating a coworker, and they married and have 2 kids. This was over 10 years ago, and I have gotten to do everything I ever wanted in my life and more. I think we're both happier for it. Story 50. A good friend of mine called off her wedding a couple of months before the big date because she and her fiancé realized they were no longer in love. Instead, she had a large party on the original date and even danced in her wedding dress as part of the celebration to honor her commitment to herself. Story 51. My brother's wedding was called off because it was discovered that he was a severe alcoholic who refused help or even the concept of help. Her family mailed out apology and cancellation letters 3 days after the invitations. Story 52. All of a sudden, he wanted to move out of state to a very specific place that he had ties to with an organization he volunteered with. 3 months before our wedding date, he still didn't have his tuxedo. When I asked him if he was going to get it, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I'm not even excited for a wedding." I will never forget how I felt in that moment. I was crushed. To this day, I don't know why he wanted to leave so badly. He wouldn't even wait for me to figure out a place we could both be happy going to. He asked me to go with him, but it didn't feel genuine. This was almost exactly 1 year ago, and I am still heartbroken and haven't been able to fully move on. Story 53. His mom started taking over the wedding planning. When we tried to assert ourselves, she would take him out for ice cream and explain why he needed to do certain things. She claimed that my family's only purpose in life was to create problems for her, as my sister encouraged me to ensure the wedding reflected my desires. She insisted that the wedding was not our wedding, but rather the family's wedding. After we broke up, she called my family members to tell them I was a terrible person and called me to say I was unlovable. She blocked not only me but my entire family on Facebook, including people she wasn't friends with and had never met in real life. 18 months later, he was engaged again. I sometimes think about that poor woman and hope that she learned a lesson. Story 54. Because I became pregnant and the due date was on our wedding day. We are still together, just not married. We used the wedding money for a down payment on a house. No regrets. Story 55. We fell apart after a miscarriage, and he drew farther away from me to the point I didn't recognize the person I was with. We never fought, and then we were arguing about the most minor things almost every day. He refused to apologize when he hurt me, always causing me more pain. One day, I walked 40 minutes in the sun to meet him after work at his house, and he picked a fight because I wanted to hear just one Fleetwood Mac song to relax after a very stressful day. He was so difficult that I chose to walk back home for another 40 minutes, and he simply sent me a message to ask how I was the other day. No apologies, nothing. All this time, we were planning the wedding, and while I just wanted to set a date and make it as intimate as possible, he wanted a large event with all the details, which scared me. Then he started saying he wanted to explore his bisexuality. We are both bisexual, but he never lived it while I did. A little later, he asked to open the relationship. I didn't want to, but I agreed, and it unfolded like the classic tale of reluctant open relationships. He dated many people, both men and women, in the first few weeks and asked me to try it too. He even helped me install a dating app. I started going out with people and then realized I was having so much fun and being treated so much better by strangers than in my almost 5-year engagement. I went on many dates. Meanwhile, he realized he wanted to be only with me after all and started having fits of jealousy. I realized I didn't want that for my life anymore. I broke up with him, and when I did, he became the person I had longed for all this time and tried to win me over again. But I just didn't love him like that anymore, although I still had a lot of appreciation for him. We tried again 3 times, which of course didn't work. We took some needed time apart, and now we can call each other friends again and mean it. It's not all black and white. For example, he saved me from suicide after I was drugged and raped. I'll be a bridesmaid at his wedding this year, and he'll be a groomsman at mine. We both approved of our current partners because we know each other so well and understand what is suitable for one another. He apologized a lot for his actions in the past and redeemed himself. In summary, we realized we were better as friends than as romantic partners and found people we are much more compatible with. I'm pleased to say my current partner sings Fleetwood Mac at the top of his lungs with me. Story 56. COVID occurred, and then our first daughter was born. Our second daughter arrived 15 months later. We are now too broke and, more importantly, too tired to organize another wedding. Story 57. I want to congratulate all the strong individuals in this thread for walking away during such a challenging time. You chose love for yourself. Story 58. I canceled the wedding a month before the date. There were several factors, but the biggest one was that I simply wasn't happy. Relationships should involve compromise, but it felt very one-sided for me. I do not regret the decision. Story 59. After nearly 2 years of no contribution financially, mentally, or physically, I was quite frustrated. It really highlighted how much effort was made to pacify me and how little emotional support and connection there was in our relationship. Story 60. It wasn't working, and the marriage had failed. I was unprincipled, and she was quite principled. Story 61. We canceled our wedding because I was overwhelmed with the planning. We were living with his parents at the time, and I did not want to get married while still living with them. I realized that the $30,000 we were spending on the wedding would be better used as a house deposit. We are still together after over 6 years since calling it off. It had nothing to do with our relationship. When we eventually get married, we will most likely elope. Story 62. A few months before the wedding, I found evidence that he had been cheating with my married ex-best friend and bridesmaid. Both of them gaslight me after I discovered the truth and ensured that everyone we knew thought I was crazy. It was a challenging time. Story 63. I had the opposite experience with my ex. He barely showed any interest in having kids and mentioned not wanting any. That was it for me. I have always wanted children. Now I'm married with 3 of my own. Story 64. The wedding was a source of stress that ultimately led to him canceling and breaking up with me 6 months in advance. I was so focused on everything being perfect and becoming the ideal wife for him that it ended up being what neither of us wanted. Our honeymoon was booked and paid for, and we couldn't get a refund. We managed to get back a small amount of money for the wedding expenses we had booked, but we did lose money overall. We did not argue or get angry with each other. I was heartbroken and he was distraught. We took time apart. Now, just 1 week away from what would have been our wedding day, we are giving the relationship another chance and going on the honeymoon as a holiday. Our first together in nearly 8 years. We'll see what happens. Story 65. We hadn't sent the invitations yet, but had booked the venue. They started talking about starting a family right away. They had known I was child-free for the duration of our relationship. I guess they thought I was trapped and would change my mind. I did about marrying them. I am so grateful to my younger self for sticking to my beliefs. Story 66. This isn't my experience, but my brother was engaged to his ex of 6 years. She was extremely controlling, emotionally manipulative, and obsessed with having everything her way. At the time, she was graduating college the same summer they were supposed to get married, while my brother was already 3 years into a successful career, earning a great salary. She wanted to move to a small town to be a teacher making 4 times less than he did and expected him to walk away from everything he had built. When he said no, she became furious and physically aggressive toward him. He ended the engagement a month before the wedding. After calling off the wedding, his ex stole the $10,000 honeymoon trip to Europe that my brother had paid for. Her aunt, who was the travel agent that booked everything, went back and quietly transferred all the reservations into his ex's name, even though the credit card used was my brother's. The ex ended up going on the honeymoon with her equally unhinged mother. Honestly, her mother had already hijacked the wedding planning anyway. She misspelled my brother's name on the invitations and refused to correct the error. Between the two of them, it was clear they loved his bank account far more than they ever respected him. My brother didn't even bother fighting them for the trip. He told us, "Money is replaceable, but my sanity isn't." 3 months later, his ex got engaged to a guy she had previously introduced to my brother as her lab partner. It's been 4 years, and let's just say she hasn't aged well and seems pretty miserable. It was a complete disaster, but honestly, I'm just thankful she never became my sister-in-law. Story 67. In-laws wanted to pay for the reception without any drama. Then the mother-in-law took over and things escalated. We started receiving calls from suppliers wanting deposits, but the mother-in-law was nowhere to be seen. We paid them. Demand increased. The mother-in-law had a tantrum and quit her job. Suddenly, we were responsible for a $70,000 wedding. I told my wife no and canceled. There were tears for a week, but our 15-year anniversary is next year. Story 68. The woman I was engaged to changed dramatically once I placed the ring on her finger. I began to pay closer attention to her behavior and words. As time passed, it became clear that her primary interest was my financial resources and her desire to avoid working again, essentially making her a gold digger. I refuse to support someone who only wants to take without contributing anything in return after I have worked hard to provide for myself. Story 69. I found photos of my best friend naked on his phone when I was 19 and made a poor choice by looking through it. I would never do that again. She hadn't sent those photos to him. She had uploaded them to what she thought was a private Tumblr, and he somehow discovered them without her knowledge. It gave off immediate creepy vibes. It's worth mentioning that he had broken his phone a week earlier, and I bought him a new one. I later discovered he had emailed himself the photos to transfer them to the new device. Even to this day, 8 years later, he claims to anyone who will listen that we broke up because I cheated on him. Story 70. I called off my wedding 2 months before the date. We loved the idea of marriage more than we loved each other. Counseling revealed significant differences, children and careers, that we had not addressed. Felt wrong, so I ended it. It was heartbreaking, but I feel relieved now. Has anyone else experienced this? What made you decide to cancel? Story 71. I was the best man at my brother's wedding. While preparing for the reception, My brother was extremely disrespectful to our parents, bossing our mother around like she was his personal servant. I pulled him aside and told him that he could either treat our parents with respect or I would skip the wedding and go to a bar instead. It felt like I was about to call off my involvement in his wedding. Story 72. I discovered she had been unfaithful to me months before our engagement. The result? Anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem that have stayed with me since 2019. Story 73. I was supposed to have a courthouse wedding last summer but tested positive for COVID the night before. This led to a significant falling out with my fiancé's parents, who claimed I was manipulating their child and that I was abusive and controlling simply for getting sick. We no longer communicate with them, and our wedding is rescheduled for the end of this month. Fingers crossed neither of us gets sick this time. Story 74. I got engaged and tried to plan the wedding, but he kept avoiding the topic. Finally, I discovered he signed a contract behind my back to become an embassy guard, which prevented him from getting married. He didn't want to break up with me, and he viewed himself as the bad guy. So I willingly took on that role. He was emotionally draining and difficult. I am relieved that I ended the relationship. Story 75. I found recent selfie-style photos of him in bed with another girl. This was in the 1990s, so these were printed photos he hid in a drawer. Unfortunately, I did all the laundry and found them barely concealed while putting away his underwear. Story 76. His mother. I couldn't see spending the rest of my life with her. Also, his jealousy. Every time I talked about anyone, a coworker, a friend, he'd ask me how long I had been sleeping with them. I never cheated, but he did a lot. Story 77. We were both in the Navy, stationed on a ship in Japan. We had been together almost 3 years when I got stationed back in the United States, and she was set to leave about 3 months later to come to Virginia and live with me while I finished school. We planned to get married, and all the deposits were paid. During those 3 months apart, I realized that she had been emotionally abusive. I ended up cheating on her with another woman in my class and broke up with her, calling off the wedding when she visited me after her departure. She insisted that I inform everyone because she still wanted to get married. After I was stationed in Washington, she would call me randomly when she was drunk or high and express how much I had hurt her. I started therapy and recalled a memory I had suppressed of her assaulting me. When I confronted her, she could not explain why she acted that way. Eventually, she called me unexpectedly, claiming she needed to confess that she had cheated on me with 2 other women less than 30 days after I left Japan. We no longer communicate. Story 78. I am not proud of this, but someone I have always had strong feelings for re-entered my life at a time when I was really vulnerable. Limerence took over, my engagement fell apart, and no, it didn't work out with him either. Story 79. I was going to marry this girl in a massively multiplayer online game. I know it's a silly little story, but it has some intense real-world drama. Some backstory and context asterisk. My friend and I played this online game, a virtual world. We were about 19, a little out of high school and in college. We mostly played together and were primarily focused on making money and building businesses. We weren't very concerned with fighting or being social for fun. He was more of a programming type guy, while I was an artist with some hardware and tech knowledge but zero talent for working out systems like him. Often, we had to go out exploring to find resources to make things we could sell. Eventually, we became extremely popular a few years later once we figured things out, but then others copied us, oversaturating the market that we didn't create per se, but revolutionized. Our downfall, oddly enough, was that we became too efficient, meaning people could come in, get exactly what they wanted, and leave. You'd think that would be good, right? Maybe for the customer, but not for us. I realized a few months after we called it quits that having everything so organized meant customers would come in, get what they wanted, not look around, and leave. Meanwhile, other places were chaotic messes, making customers stay longer, allowing them to discover other items they might want to buy, thus earning those shops more money and making them look busier. Meanwhile, our once top business looked empty because everyone knew where all the new items were. The actual story. Now on to the wedding drama. This takes place about a year into our 7-year venture. We had not yet reached our peak, but we were doing well and figuring things out steadily. When we started, this game had been out for about 4 or 5 years, but we were discovering and doing things no one else had done. During our explorations, people would often hassle us. We never took it seriously, but thought it would be funny to hire some protection or mercenaries to do the talking for us. We met an in-game couple and talked about how well-designed the game was. We joked about needing protection, and they wanted to take the role. Instead of paying them with money, we offered free items we crafted for them, cool outfits, weapons, accessories, vehicles, etc. The wife logged in more than the husband, but it worked out since people preferred to talk to her rather than us, so it never caused too much trouble. Over time, however, she grew more flirty with me. Being a 19-year-old nerd, I obviously reciprocated. It was just a game, and they were just an in-game couple. I thought the flirting didn't mean anything as she likely lived far away from me. As my friends and my business ventures progressed, we allowed the couple to manage some of our ventures, and we were earning enough to pay them. Since the wife was online daily while the husband logged in 2 or 3 times a week, we paid her more. My friend typically worked on new systems and external aspects to help with the game, but since I was focused on aesthetics, more staff interacted with me, including the bodyguard turn manager, who started flirting with me more. Eventually, we were virtually dating. I asked about her husband, and she said he wasn't around when I was and implied that I was more attentive. At this point, he had stopped logging in, and things between us were becoming serious. I had assumed it would remain casual, but she began wanting to exchange pictures and messages. I never sent anything explicit, just my face, but she sent nudes. We even talked on the phone or voice chatted, I can't remember, but it felt like things could get real. We were going to get married in-game, but one night her in-game husband logged in, furious with me. Turned out they lived together. Not only did they know each other in real life, but they were also a couple. Here's the shocking part. They had 2 children together. At least one of the kids was definitely his. The details are hazy. I don't know his age at the time, but I know she was about 30 or 31. I was probably around 20 during this discussion. He was understandably upset, but I told him I had no idea they were that serious in-game or in real life. I had assumed she was closer to 25. I stopped talking to her after she admitted everything he said was true. She kept sending me messages about how much she needed me and that we were soulmates, but I didn't see it that way. We had only known each other for 7 or 8 months, and it was all in-game. Lesson learned for me. She never disclosed any of this until her boyfriend told me. Eventually, I blocked them both. Looking back, her kids are probably older now than I was then. I didn't ask about their ages, only found out they existed when the guy told me. I shared everything with my friend, feeling horrible that I had ruined a real couple. Now, I realized she was the one who ruined it. I was 19, and she was probably 30 when we first met and 31 when it ended. She didn't disclose anything important to me, and while I understood my feelings were becoming genuine, I believe hers were real from the start. For me, I considered it an in-game relationship, recalling a similar one at 15 with another girl, but outside the game, we were only friends and did unambiguous flirting, never anything explicit. Thankfully, I had the self-awareness not to be strange at that age. I never flirted with another girl in any online game or setting again. In fact, I don't play self-inserts or male characters to this day. I only play female characters and avoid getting close to anyone because that's not what I'm looking for. My friend and I continued to play that game and found great success with our businesses until it became too efficient, leading to our decline. Many women tried to approach me, about 4 to 6, which is a lot for someone like me. I noticed they tended to be older women around 35 to 50, while I was just a 20-something, probably traumatized without realizing it. I hesitate to call it trauma, as it feels like I'm undermining more serious issues. 2 of them even wanted to be my mommy in a rather uncomfortable way. I don't have mommy issues and have a great mother, so that definitely put me off interacting with them. This online game had many people with niche interests, and I want to clarify that I had many female friends who were not trying to develop romantic connections. Many of those friends were older women, around 10 in total, who were genuinely supportive. So it wasn't all bad or weird. Some of them are still friends on Steam. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.